In the heart of a sprawling city where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, there lived a man named Richard Langston. He was no ordinary man. He was a billionaire, one of the richest people in the world. But what set him apart wasn't just his wealth. It was his reputation for taking risks. Richard had built his empire by pushing boundaries, daring to do things others thought impossible. His name was synonymous with innovation, ambition, and success. Richard's latest project, however, was unlike anything he'd ever done before. It was called Project Zenith, and whispers about it had been circulating for months. No one knew exactly what it was, but everyone agreed on one thing: it was going to change the world. Reporters camped outside Richard's headquarters day and night, hoping to catch even a glimpse of the mysterious invention. Social media buzzed with theories, some claiming it was a new form of renewable energy, while others speculated it might be a device that could manipulate time itself. On this particular morning, Richard woke up feeling invincible. Today was the big day, the unveiling of Project Zenith. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit, he couldn't help but smile at his reflection. This was his moment, the culmination of years of hard work and sleepless nights. Nothing could stop him now, or so he thought. The venue for the event was a grand ballroom located in the tallest building in the city. Hundreds of guests had gathered inside, including celebrities, politicians, and tech moguls. The air buzzed with excitement as waiters weaved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne. Giant screens displayed teasers of Project Zenith, glowing visuals of futuristic cities powered by an unknown source of energy. People whispered among themselves, their curiosity reaching a fever pitch. Richard arrived at the venue in his sleek black limousine. Cameras flashed as he stepped out onto the red carpet, waving confidently to the cheering crowd. For a man who thrived in the spotlight, this was paradise. Inside, reporters jostled for position, eager to capture every word he would say during his presentation. As he made his way to the stage, Richard felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. This was what he lived for, the thrill of showing the world something they'd never seen before. But just as he was about to ascend the stairs leading to the podium, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Frowning slightly, he pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was an email from someone he didn't recognize, a student named Marcus Johnson. The subject line caught his eye. "Don't do it." Intrigued but dismissive, Richard opened the message quickly. The email began with a polite greeting followed by a stern warning. Marcus wrote that Project Zenith was dangerous and shouldn't be activated under any circumstances. According to him, the technology relied on unstable energy sources that could have catastrophic consequences if mishandled. Richard skimmed through the rest of the message, barely paying attention. How could some random college kid possibly understand the complexities of his invention? Shaking his head, he deleted the email without giving it another thought. Backstage, Richard took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was here. He wasn't just unveiling a product, he was changing the course of history. With renewed determination, he walked onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. The lights were bright, almost blinding, but Richard didn't mind. He loved being in the center of attention. As he adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of expectant faces, he felt unstoppable. The presentation began smoothly. Richard spoke passionately about the potential of Project Zenith, describing how it could revolutionize industries and improve lives across the globe. The audience hung on to every word, captivated by his charisma and vision. Large screens behind him displayed dazzling animations of futuristic cities bathed in golden light, powered entirely by his groundbreaking technology. Cheers erupted periodically, and Richard basked in the adoration. As he reached the climax of his speech, Richard announced that he would now demonstrate Project Zenith for the first time. A hush fell over the room as technicians wheeled out, a massive machine covered in sleek panels and blinking lights. It looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Richard gestured dramatically toward the contraption, his confidence unwavering. But then, just as he was about to press the button to activate the demo, his phone buzzed again. Irritated by the interruption, he glanced down at the screen. Once again, it was Marcus. This time, the subject line screamed, "You're making a huge mistake." Richard hesitated for a split second, wondering if he should take another look. After all, 2 warnings from the same person were unusual, but pride got the better of him. He silenced his phone and turned back to the machine, determined not to let anything ruin his big moment. Little did Richard know this decision would soon put him and everyone in the room in grave danger. Richard Langston stood confidently on the stage, his finger hovering over the button that would activate Project Zenith. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of anticipation. Everyone in the audience leaned forward, their eyes glued to the massive machine at the center of the ballroom. It gleamed under the spotlights, a marvel of engineering that promised to change the world, or so Richard believed. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment, and pressed down firmly. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, the machine roared to life. Bright pulses of light shot out from its core, illuminating the entire room in an otherworldly glow. Gasps of awe rippled through the crowd as holographic projections of futuristic cities appeared above them. Buildings floated in midair, powered by streams of golden energy. People cheered, clapping enthusiastically, convinced they were witnessing history unfold. But then something strange began to happen. The pulses of light grew erratic, flickering wildly instead of maintaining their steady rhythm. A low rumble echoed through the ballroom, causing the floor to vibrate slightly. Some guests exchanged nervous glances, unsure if this was part of the demonstration or something else entirely. Richard noticed the change too, but he tried to reassure himself it was just a minor glitch. After all, cutting-edge technology often had quirks during its first public showing. The vibrations intensified and the machine started emitting sharp crackling sounds. Sparks flew from its panels, startling the technicians who were monitoring it closely. One of them shouted, "Sir, we need to shut it down." But Richard hesitated. Shutting it down now would mean admitting failure in front of hundreds of people, something he couldn't bear to do. Instead, he gestured for the team to stay calm and give him a moment to assess the situation. Just as panic began to creep into his mind, Richard's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't ignore it. Pulling it out quickly, he saw another email from Marcus Johnson. The subject line read, "It's too late now." His heart skipped a beat as he opened the message. Marcus's words were urgent and clear. "The instability you're seeing is exactly what I warned you about. If you don't disable the machine immediately, it will overload and cause catastrophic damage. Trust me. I've studied this kind of technology. You have minutes, maybe less." Richard stared at the screen, his confidence crumbling. For the first time in years, doubt clouded his judgment. Could this student really know more than his team of experts? Was the machine truly as dangerous as Marcus claimed? Before he could decide what to do, the chaos escalated. A loud bang erupted from the machine, sending shockwaves through the ballroom. Smoke poured out of its vents, filling the air with a thick haze. Alarms blared deafeningly, drowning out the cheers that had filled the room moments earlier. Panic spread like wildfire as guests scrambled toward the exits, shoving past each other in their desperation to escape. Children cried, women screamed, and men shouted orders that no one listened to. On stage, Richard froze, paralyzed by fear and indecision. His dream project, the culmination of years of hard work, was unraveling before his very eyes. The machine continued to spew sparks and smoke, its core glowing ominously brighter with each passing second. Technicians frantically typed commands into their laptops trying to regain control, but nothing worked. Someone yelled, "We're losing containment." That's when Richard remembered Marcus's email. Desperate for answers, he dialed the A number listed in the message without hesitation. To his astonishment, Marcus answered on the first ring. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the noise like a lifeline. "Mr. Langston," Marcus said, "I assume you're calling because things aren't going well." "Yes," Richard stammered, gripping the phone tightly. "What do I do? How do I stop this?" Marcus wasted no time. "Listen carefully. Inside the machine, there's a panel labeled Emergency Override. Open it and locate circuit B12. Disable it manually. It should cut off the power source feeding the core. Do it fast, or the whole thing will explode. Richard relayed the instructions to his team, who rushed to follow them. Meanwhile, he stayed on the line with Marcus, asking questions and receiving precise guidance. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Marcus's composure kept Richard grounded. Step by step, they worked together to stabilize the situation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the machine sputtered and died. The lights dimmed, and the alarms fell silent. Thick smoke still lingered in the air, but the immediate threat was over. Exhausted and shaken, Richard slumped against the podium, his hands trembling. He looked around at the devastated ballroom, realizing how close he'd come to disaster, not just for himself, but for everyone present. As the reality sank in, Richard turned his attention back to Marcus. "Thank you," he said hoarsely into the phone. "You saved us." There was a brief pause before Marcus replied, "You're welcome, but next time, listen to the warnings." With those words, the call ended, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts. Who was this young man who had known exactly what to do in a crisis? And why hadn't Richard taken him seriously sooner? These questions swirled in his mind as emergency responders arrived to assess the damage. Later that evening, as the dust settled and the last of the guests left the venue, Richard sat in his office staring blankly at the wall. The events of the day replayed in his head like a nightmare. He had always prided himself on being fearless, unstoppable, but today, he had been neither. Humility washed over him as he realized how much he owed to someone he barely knew. Determined to find answers, Richard pulled up Marcus's email once more. Scrolling through the messages, he noticed something he hadn't paid attention to earlier: a university email address. Marcus Johnson was a student at a local college, studying advanced sciences. Richard felt a pang of guilt. Here was a young man with knowledge far beyond his years, yet Richard had dismissed him as irrelevant. The billionaire picked up his phone and dialed the number again. When Marcus answered, Richard spoke earnestly. "I want to meet you," he said. "We need to talk." Marcus sounded surprised but agreed. They arranged to meet the following afternoon at a quiet cafe near the university campus. As Richard hung up, he felt a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. What had driven Marcus to reach out to him? And what other insights might the young man possess? That night, as Richard lay in bed, sleep eluded him. He couldn't stop thinking about the day's events and the role Marcus had played in averting catastrophe. He had always believed that success came from taking bold risks, but now he wondered if caution and humility were just as important. Perhaps, he thought, this experience would teach him more than he ever imagined. The next afternoon, Richard Langston arrived at the small cafe near the university campus. He was dressed casually for the first time in years. No tailored suits or expensive watches. Instead, he wore a simple blazer and jeans, hoping to appear approachable. As he entered the cozy establishment, his eyes scanned the room until they landed on a young man sitting alone at a corner table. It was Marcus Johnson. Marcus looked nothing like the image Richard had conjured in his mind. The student was dressed in a plain hoodie and sneakers, his backpack resting on the chair beside him. His face was calm, almost serene, as if averting a global catastrophe was just another day's work. Richard hesitated for a moment, feeling oddly out of place, before walking over to introduce himself. "Marcus?" Richard asked, extending his hand. The young man looked up and nodded, shaking Richard's hand firmly. "Mr. Langston," Marcus replied, his tone polite but measured. "Please call me Richard," the billionaire said, taking a seat across from him. "And thank you again for everything." Marcus shrugged modestly. "I did what I could. You're the one who followed my instructions." Richard smiled faintly, still grappling with the enormity of what had happened. "Honestly, I don't know how you knew what to do. No one else, including my team, had any idea how to stop that machine." "That's because they didn't see the warning signs," Marcus explained. I've been studying similar technologies for a while now. When I heard about Project Zenith, I recognized some red flags right away. Richard leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of red flags? Marcus sighed, as if preparing himself for a long explanation. Your machine uses quantum energy, fields, right? Well, those fields are incredibly powerful but also highly unstable. If not contained properly, they can overload and cause chain reactions. That's why I warned you. It wasn't safe to activate it publicly without thorough testing. Richard listened intently, his guilt growing with each word. I should have listened to you sooner, he admitted. But why did you even bother reaching out? Most people wouldn't have cared. Marcus paused, considering his answer. Because I believe knowledge is meant to help people, not hurt them. When I saw what you were doing, I couldn't stay silent. I figured someone needed to speak up, even if it was just a student like me. His words struck a chord with Richard. For years he had prided himself on being innovative and bold, but now he realized how reckless he had been. He had prioritized ambition over responsibility, and it had nearly cost him and countless others their lives. I owe you more than I can ever repay, Richard said sincerely. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? Marcus chuckled softly. You don't owe me anything, I'm just glad no one got hurt. Richard shook his head. That's not good enough. You saved my life, Marcus, and not just mine. The lives of everyone in that room. I want to offer you an internship at my company. Work with us and we'll rebuild Project Zenith together. Make it safer, better. To Richard's surprise, Marcus didn't jump at the opportunity. Instead, he frowned slightly, looking thoughtful. I appreciate the offer, he said slowly, but I need to think about it. Your company has a reputation for rushing projects to market regardless of the risks. I don't want to be part of something that puts people in danger again. Richard felt a pang of shame. He couldn't deny the truth in Marcus's words. Over the years, his relentless pursuit of success had sometimes come at the expense of safety and ethics. But this experience had changed him, or so he hoped. You're right, Richard admitted. We've made mistakes in the past. But I promise you, things will be different moving forward. I've learned my lesson, Marcus. I won't let pride or greed cloud my judgment anymore. Marcus studied Richard's face, searching for sincerity. Finally, he nodded. Okay, let's start with a meeting. We'll discuss how to improve Project Zenith. But only if you're serious about making changes, not just giving lip service. Deal, Richard said, relief washing over him. Thank you, Marcus. You won't regret this. Over the next few weeks, Richard and Marcus began working closely together. They met regularly, poring over blueprints and data, brainstorming ways to stabilize the machine's energy source. Richard was amazed by Marcus's depth of knowledge and creativity. Despite his youth, the student approached every problem with clarity and precision, often spotting flaws that even seasoned engineers missed. Their collaboration wasn't always smooth sailing. At times, Marcus challenged Richard's ideas, pushing back when he felt the billionaire was reverting to old habits. During one particularly heated discussion, Marcus slammed his hands on the table and said, "If we rush this, history will repeat itself. Is that what you want?" Richard flinched, reminded once again of the chaos he had unleashed. "No," he replied quietly. "You're right. Let's take our time." As they worked, Richard found himself learning more than just technical details. He admired Marcus's dedication to ethical innovation, his belief that technology should serve humanity rather than exploit it. Slowly but surely, Richard began adopting these principles himself, reshaping his vision for the future. Meanwhile, news of the near disaster spread quickly, sparking debates about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement. Critics accused Richard of recklessness, while supporters praised Marcus for stepping in when it mattered most. The media dubbed the incident the Zenith Crisis, and both men became household names overnight. Despite the scrutiny, Richard remained focused on fixing his mistakes. With Marcus's guidance, he announced plans to redesign Project Zenith with safety as its top priority. He also pledged millions of dollars to fund research into sustainable energy solutions, ensuring that his company would contribute positively to society. Through it all, Marcus remained humble. He declined interviews and avoided the spotlight, preferring to focus on his studies and work. But Richard never forgot the young man's courage and wisdom. In private conversations, he often referred to Marcus as his guardian angel, acknowledging that he might not have survived without him. One evening, as they wrapped up another productive session, Richard turned to Marcus with a smile. "You've taught me a lot these past few weeks," he said. "Not just about technology, but about leadership and responsibility." Marcus grinned. "Glad to hear it. Just remember, one mistake doesn't define you. What matters is what you do next." Richard nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was excited about the future, not because of fame or fortune, but because he finally understood the true meaning of success. Months passed since the chaos of the Zenith crisis, and Richard Langston was a changed man. The once arrogant billionaire now approached life with humility, always mindful of the lessons he had learned from Marcus Johnson. Their partnership had blossomed into something more profound, a mentorship that challenged Richard to rethink not only his inventions, but also his values. Together they worked tirelessly to redesign Project Zenith, ensuring it would be safe, sustainable, and beneficial for humanity. Richard's transformation didn't go unnoticed. His employees were surprised by his newfound willingness to listen, especially to younger voices in the company. He held regular brainstorming sessions where everyone, regardless of rank or experience, could share their ideas. Richard even implemented policies requiring rigorous safety testing before any product launch, a stark contrast to his previous move fast and break things philosophy. Word of these changes spread quickly, earning him cautious praise from critics who had once dismissed him as reckless. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to balance his role as Richard's advisor with his studies at the university. Despite the demands of working alongside one of the world's most powerful men, Marcus remained grounded. He attended classes, participated in study groups, and spent hours in the library researching advanced energy systems. Yet, whenever Richard called, Marcus answered knowing that his contributions mattered deeply. Their collaboration wasn't without challenges. There were days when disagreements arose, particularly when Richard suggested shortcuts to speed up development. Each time, Marcus reminded him of the dangers of rushing. "We're building something that could change the world," Marcus would say firmly. "It has to be perfect, not just good enough." Richard respected Marcus's determination even if it sometimes frustrated him. Over time, he came to see the young man not just as a brilliant student, but as a moral compass guiding him toward better decisions. Their bond grew stronger, built on mutual respect and shared goals. One evening after another long day of work, Richard invited Marcus to dinner at his penthouse apartment. It was a rare opportunity for them to step away from the technical details of Project Zenith and simply talk. The view from Richard's balcony was breathtaking, offering a panoramic vista of the city skyline bathed in golden twilight. They sat at a small table overlooking the city, plates of gourmet food laid out before them. "So," Richard began, raising his glass of wine, "how does it feel to know you've saved the great Richard Langston?" Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "I didn't save you, I just pointed out what was obvious to anyone paying attention. You're the one who fixed everything." Richard smiled but shook his head. "No, Marcus. Without your warnings, I wouldn't have known where to start. You saw the danger when no one else did, including me. That takes guts." Marcus shrugged modestly. "I just care about doing the right thing. If I hadn't reached out, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying the young man across from him. "You know, you remind me of myself. At least, who I used to be. Back then, I believed I could conquer the world with sheer willpower. But I forgot something important along the way. Responsibility." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "It's easy to get caught up in ambition. Trust me, I understand wanting to make a difference. But ambition without ethics is dangerous. You're absolutely right, Richard agreed. And that's why I need people like you around. To keep me honest. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Marcus's childhood, his dreams for the future, and his passion for science. Richard listened intently, fascinated by the young man's journey. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, Marcus had faced countless obstacles, yet he never lost sight of his goals. He spoke passionately about his desire to use technology to uplift underserved communities, a vision that resonated deeply with Richard. I want to help you achieve that, Richard said earnestly. Whatever resources you need, whatever support you require, consider it yours. Marcus hesitated, clearly moved by the offer. Thank you, he said softly. But I don't want special treatment. I want to earn my place. Richard smiled, warmly. You already have, Marcus, more than you realize. As weeks turned into months, the redesigned version of Project Zenith began taking shape. This time, every aspect of the machine was meticulously engineered with safety and sustainability in mind. The team incorporated cutting-edge fail-safes to prevent another catastrophic malfunction, thanks largely to Marcus's input. When the final prototype was completed, Richard insisted on conducting extensive tests in controlled environments before unveiling it to the public. Finally, the day arrived for the relaunch of Project Zenith. Unlike the chaotic gala that had nearly ended in disaster, this event was designed to be intimate and meaningful. Held at a community center rather than a glamorous ballroom, the gathering brought together scientists, activists, educators, and local leaders. The focus wasn't on wealth or fame, it was on impact. When Richard took the stage, the audience greeted him with polite applause. Gone were the flashy lights and grandiose displays. Instead, the presentation was simple and heartfelt. Richard began by acknowledging the mistakes of the past, owning up to his role in the crisis and thanking those who had helped him rebuild trust. Today, he said, his voice steady and sincere, we are unveiling a new chapter. Not just for my company, but for the future of innovation. Behind this project stands someone who deserves recognition far beyond what words can express. Please welcome Marcus Johnson, the true hero behind Project Zenith. The room erupted in applause as Marcus stepped onto the stage, looking slightly uncomfortable under the spotlight. Richard handed him the microphone, urging him to speak. With some reluctance, Marcus addressed the audience, sharing his perspective on the importance of ethical innovation and collaboration. This isn't about one person or one invention, Marcus said humbly. It's about working together to create solutions that benefit everyone, not just a select few. I'm grateful to have been part of this journey, and I hope it inspires others to think critically about how we use technology. The crowd cheered enthusiastically, moved by Marcus's sincerity. For many, his presence symbolized hope, a reminder that anyone, regardless of background, could make a difference. After the event, Richard and Marcus stood outside the community center, watching guests mingle and celebrate. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Richard placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. You did it, Richard said. You proved that age and status don't define greatness. You inspired an entire room full of people tonight. Marcus grinned, still holding the microphone in his hand. We did it. Together. Richard chuckled. Yes, we did. And this is only the beginning. As they gazed out at the city lights, both men knew their partnership had the potential to achieve incredible things. They had weathered storms, faced challenges, and emerged stronger because of it. With Marcus's wisdom and Richard's resources, they were poised to tackle even bigger problems in the years to come. For Richard, this marked a turning point, a chance to leave a legacy rooted in integrity and compassion. For Marcus, it was validation that his dreams were within reach. Together, they represented the power of collaboration, proving that when brilliance meets humility, anything is possible. The relaunch of Project Zenith marked the start of a new era, not just for Richard Langston and Marcus Johnson, but for the world. The redesigned machine, now safer and more efficient, was hailed as a breakthrough in sustainable energy technology. It had the potential to power entire cities without harming the environment, offering a glimmer of hope in a world grappling with climate change and resource depletion. News outlets celebrated the achievement, calling it a triumph of science and humanity. But for Richard and Marcus, the accolades were secondary. What mattered most was the impact they could make together. In the weeks following the event, Richard's company announced several initiatives aimed at addressing global challenges. They partnered with environmental organizations to deploy Project Zenith in underserved communities, providing clean energy to areas that had long been neglected. Schools, hospitals, and small businesses began thriving thanks to the reliable power supply, transforming lives in ways no one had anticipated. Richard credited Marcus for inspiring this shift in focus, acknowledging that the young man's vision for equitable innovation had reshaped his priorities. Marcus, however, remained humble despite the praise. He continued his studies, balancing coursework with his growing responsibilities at Richard's company. Though he had initially resisted the spotlight, he eventually embraced it as an opportunity to advocate for ethical practices in technology. He gave speeches at conferences, wrote articles for scientific journals, and mentored other students who shared his passion for creating meaningful change. His message was simple yet powerful. Innovation should serve humanity, not exploit it. Richard watched proudly as Marcus blossomed into a leader, often reflecting on how much the young man had influenced him. Gone was the reckless billionaire who chased profits at any cost. In his place stood a thoughtful, purpose-driven individual committed to leaving a positive legacy. Richard began pouring resources into educational programs, funding scholarships for underprivileged students and supporting research in renewable energy. He even established the Marcus Johnson Fellowship, named after his protege, to encourage young innovators to pursue careers in science and engineering. One afternoon, as they sat in Richard's office reviewing plans for a new project, Marcus turned to him with a smile. "You've come a long way," he said. "I remember when you wouldn't listen to anyone." Richard chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "And I remember when you wouldn't let me get away with anything. You kept me honest, Marcus. I owe you everything." Marcus shook his head. "No, you don't. You made the choice to change. That's what matters." Their conversation shifted to the future. Together, they dreamed of expanding Project Zenith to reach even more people, exploring applications beyond energy generation. Could the technology be adapted to purify water, or perhaps aid in disaster relief efforts? The possibilities seemed endless, limited only by their imagination. As they brainstormed, Richard realized something profound. Marcus wasn't just his collaborator, he was family. Their partnership had transcended professional boundaries, evolving into a genuine friendship built on trust and mutual respect. For the first time in years, Richard felt truly fulfilled, knowing that his work was making a difference. Months later, Richard decided to step down as CEO of his company. It was a decision that shocked the business world, but to those who knew him best, it made perfect sense. At a press conference, he explained his choice with characteristic candor. "My journey has taught me that leadership isn't about titles or wealth, it's about service. I want to dedicate the rest of my life to mentoring the next generation of innovators, ensuring they have the tools and guidance they need to succeed." He appointed Marcus as the head of a newly formed division focused on ethical innovation, entrusting him with the responsibility of shaping the company's future. Though Marcus initially hesitated, fearing he wasn't ready for such a monumental role, Richard reassured him. "You've already proven yourself," he said. "Now, it's time to lead." Under Marcus's direction, the company flourished. Projects once deemed too risky or unconventional found support, leading to groundbreaking discoveries in fields ranging from medicine to agriculture. Employees described the workplace culture as inclusive and forward-thinking, a testament to Marcus's commitment to fostering collaboration and creativity. Meanwhile, Richard embarked on a new chapter of his own. He traveled the world, speaking at universities and community centers about the importance of responsible innovation. He shared his story openly, admitting his past mistakes and urging others to learn from them. His talks resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to pursue their passions with integrity. Years passed, and the bond between Richard and Marcus only grew stronger. They stayed in constant contact, exchanging ideas and celebrating milestones, both personal and professional. When Marcus graduated at the top of his class, Richard attended the ceremony, beaming with pride as he watched his friend accept his diploma. And when Richard published his memoir, detailing his transformation and the lessons he had learned, Marcus wrote the foreword, describing their partnership as a testament to the power of humility and collaboration. Together they became symbols of hope, a reminder that even the most unlikely alliances could spark extraordinary change. Their story inspired millions, proving that greatness wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by the willingness to grow, adapt, and serve others. On a quiet evening, as they stood side by side overlooking the city skyline, Richard turned to Marcus with a smile. "Do you ever wonder where we'd be if you hadn't sent me that email?" Marcus laughed, probably still cleaning up the mess from the first demo. They both chuckled, the memory of the Zenith crisis, now a distant chapter in their journey. But as they gazed out at the illuminated city below, they knew one thing for certain. The future was bright, and they were ready to face it together.